Communitech helps companies start, grow, and succeed. Our members raise 19% more capital, raise more rounds, hold more patents, and have an increased financial velocity. Communitech member companies scale faster than anywhere else in Canada. So if you're not a Communitech member yet, let's fix that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Wood, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our Ask Me Anything session on managing your investor pipeline. Next slide, Mackenzie. Before we get started, I just have a few reminders that I'd like to share with today's audience. So our session is being recorded, and you can find all of our past AMA recordings at communitech.ca. So feel free to go there and check out some past sessions, or if you want to view this session again. As earlier mentioned, you can use the Q&A feature to ask all of your questions. We do highly encourage you to ask those questions throughout today's discussion. We'd really like it to be an interactive session. And this session is meant to provide general guidance. There are follow-up office hours available with today's speaker, Jonah, and I will put the information in the chat on how you can access those office hours. And lastly, if you can have a browser window open or your phone handy, we'll be using menti.com today to poll the audience. So if you could get that ready. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to today's speaker. So I'm so pleased to have Jonah Midanik here, a venture capitalist, as well as managing director at Acceleprise, to share his thoughts and perspective on managing your investor pipeline. So Jonah, welcome. And I will turn it over to the Mentimeter to get that set up so that we can better target today's discussion to match the audience. So I will share my screen now.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Christina. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so for those of you in the audience, if you could go to menti.com and use the code 86842328 in order to answer today's questions. And we'll just give it a second there for folks to access that and start responding. So the first question is, where are you in your fundraising journey? So it'll just help us to, as I said, better target today's conversation to where you are on that journey. So again, menti.com using the code 86842328. I'm not sure if people are having trouble accessing that. The second question that you should see there, oh, there we go, is what are your current fundraising plans? So we have 11 folks looking to raise in the next 6 months. We have someone who's not quite looking to raise right now. Here we go, starting to see some results coming in. So where are you in your current fundraising journey? We've got some folks that haven't raised yet, some that have raised a friends and family, and one person who's raised an institutional round. And then lastly, if you are raising, are you considering raising capital and debt together? Looks like we've got quite a few folks not sure yet. They're needing more info. Some are just looking at government grants or raising capital only. So we've got a real mix there in order to target today's conversation. So thank you all for participating and giving us a sense of where you're at. Turn it over to you to introduce yourself and today's presentation.
Really appreciate everyone's time. I know how busy you all are building something amazing. So really honored and humbled that you choose to spend some time with me. So just wanted to give a little bit about myself, only that it's interesting to frame the conversation we're about to have. So I've been a serial entrepreneur in Canada and the US, but mostly Canada as a Canadian for the last couple decades. And throughout that journey, I've seen a bunch of different ways of doing it, because one of the big takeaways that I want everyone to take away from this is there's no one way There's just the right way for you right now. So, and in that journey, my first company I founded, I ran entirely bootstrapped. We didn't take in any capital at all. And we were able to do got up to like $5 million a year in annual revenue, and was able to have an exit there. Really learned a lot, and, completely external. And from there, I was brought into Virgin, who was spinning off a new company that was the first ever big esports company. And there I got to work for some pretty amazing entrepreneurs as the head of marketing. And we raised like $100 million worth of venture. So I got to have kind of a front row seat for that journey without doing it myself. And actually that flamed out spectacularly. That really went nowhere, despite some of the amazing things we did. And from there, I went on to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, where I launched their global online gaming brands. And that was yet another experience, because unlike bootstrapping a company or raising venture, now we literally had unlimited money to do whatever we wanted. And just seeing just how different that was. And then from there, I went on and I started a SaaS company that was selling, software into big enterprises. And I was able to raise about 15 million bucks in venture capital. I was able to raise debt. I did an angel round. I did a family and friends round. So I saw the journey doing it that way as well. And now I run, I'm the Canadian partner at a US fund and accelerator called Acceleprise, where we invest in business to business software startups, usually first check in. And, we're really happy to take things at a very early stage, like pre-traction, pre-revenue. So if that's you, definitely coming out of this, please hit me up. We're actively writing checks right now. So that's a little bit about it. I've seen kind of a bunch of different sides of the journey. Just for some context, everything I talk about is going to be in kind of a North America-wide context, but narrowcast for a Canadian founder, with the assumption that ultimately you're going to be looking to raise capital, maybe not just here, but maybe in the United States as well. So the goal of today is to actually walk you through like how a round actually works. Because too often it's like, I'm raising, and then it really like the nitty gritty mechanics of A, what does happen, and B, what should happen aren't really clear. Like when I was going out to raise for the first time, it's like, oh, you just book meetings and talk to VCs. And like, yes, I guess at the most simplistic level, that is what a fundraise is. But that's really not, just quote unquote what happens. So I really wanted to walk through it today. And everyone, please do not hesitate to hop in with any questions. There's no such thing as silly questions. This is a really unique, weird micro part of the economy that, like, if you haven't done it before, is kind of a bit of a black box. So I had no idea what I was doing the first time. I'm not saying that's the case here, but do not be shy. Either type it in the Q&A or shout it out, because it's just like a surreal experience. And here's the other thing I'm going to say. So a lot of the times what happens is we all, see these crazy TechCrunch articles or hear about this company that raised, 5 million on 50 pre-revenue, and the market's so hot right now. And yeah, I mean, I guess, but the truth is raising a round's really, really, really hard. And that's true whether you're trying to raise debt, or whether you're trying to raise an angel round, or whether you're trying to raise a seed or an A or a B. It's the only time it's ever easy is if you're doing so well that money is inbound. The rest of the time it's hard. And even in those inbound times, it's often hard to know what to do and how to do it. So, my advice is really, I wouldn't believe the hype about the market being crazy. Like, yes, for the outliers, the market is crazy. But for most of us, and I include myself in this, it's a huge struggle. It's just a huge struggle to do it. And the reason is because, even just looking at Acceleprise's math, we write amongst the most checks in Canada a year. I'll write 20 checks this year. And even still, we see a couple hundred companies just to get to those 20 checks. So it's really, really hard. So today, what I want to do is walk you through the how-to of kind of how to get there. So first of all, before we get into this, a lot of this is around venture capital, but this isn't true for just venture capital. A lot of this is going to be true for angel rounds as well. And if you've got questions about like the difference and when and why, just shout it out. But for our data, and we've got 300 plus portfolio companies, and we also have a relationship with Carta, who does equity management for startups. So we see their data as well, and it shows that looking back, for founders that have raised a successful round, they've met with 30 plus different venture funds. So it's really hard to tell if you've just had a couple meetings if you're successful or not, because actually you really don't learn a heck of a lot of anything from just having a couple meetings, because I've almost never seen someone have just a few meetings and be successful. You really want to be having like quite a few meetings, and the data says at least 30, but I would recommend getting out there as much as possible for when we're doing this. And a lot of times, and this happened with me, there was, in my last company, I wasn't successful at raising for a while. And if you're not successful, that just means that there's something resonating. But what I want to cover today is like what we do with that information so that it's not a binary outcome, because it's really hard. And it's not typically a straight line. I would say for most of our companies that are successful, and most of them are successful, it's very rarely they have a bunch of meetings, someone hands them $3 million, and then they go announce it on Crunchbase. It's much more likely to be a really hard, long, arduous 3 months process. So in order to get to that number, when we talk about how to get to round success, that number is probably something like 5 funds that you're already talking to, if you're talking to funds. If you don't have those in your pipeline yet, don't worry about it. 15 plus funds that advisors like Communitech and those around you can connect you with. Communitech obviously has got good relationships with everyone in the Canadian ecosystem and then some in the US. So like that would be one great source, but there are many others. 10 plus funds from meetings you get via your network. And some of this is a networking game. And then during the fundraising process, you should be able to pull out more and more meetings. So that should give you an idea of like, should you decide and when you decide to go down this path, just what you're in for. And when they say fundraising takes 3 to 6 months, this is some of the why, because we have to get to this data point to really have a clear idea about what we're going to do. So with that said, I'm going to kind of launch into overarching big themes around how to do this. So first of all, at early stage, and I'll define an early stage as anyone who's kind of before a Series B. So if you're raising less than like $10 million, there's not going to be a ton of performance to base this on. And by that, I mean, you're not going to be able to get up there and be like, hey, I've got like $10 million in revenue, and these are our 10 best clients, and this is what they say about us, and this is our growth rate. It's much more likely if you're raising, still a very large sum of money, but a smaller sum of money in venture world, that you're not going to have just a ton of proof points to prove that what you're saying is true. So what this is going to be about, first and foremost, is a narrative. How well do we tell a story? And the story that you're telling needs to be a story about how, if you're working towards raising a venture round, how you're going to generate venture returns. And what venture returns means is how you're going to build a very, very, very big company. And a very big company is your investor on the other side of the table needs to be able to close their eyes and see how the story you're telling in 5 to 7 to 9 years means an $100 million revenue business. So there's a couple ways to do that to really shape your narrative. The first is we want to show a really big vision. So what's the way that you're going to change an industry or change the way things are done, or disrupt an old tool set, or build a new paradigm, or introduce a new category, or the companies that are very successful at fundraising. And again, when I was at Virgin Gaming, we raised $100 million from external sources. And we were terrible at executing, but we were great at storytelling. And so that's a big thing here. The second one is obviously we need to demonstrate a big market. Now, what big means really depends who you're trying to raise from. If you're raising debt, a big market could mean an $100 million market. It doesn't need to be huge. They just want to make sure that your underlying numbers let you pay back the debt. That's all it. If a debt fund lends you $500,000 or $3 million, they just want you to pay that back with their, 5, 10, 15% interest. They don't care. You don't need to make much more than that for it to hit their numbers and hit their investment criteria. If you're raising from Canadian VCs, often $1 billion plus market is okay. That would be considered big. For most big US venture capital firms, they want a clear demonstration of a $10 billion plus serviceable market. So when I say demonstrate a big market, I mean a really big market. And that doesn't mean all of your market needs to be available to you right now, but your vision needs to ladder into a big market. Another tip, this is kind of in terms of big theme successful, you definitely don't want to be argumentative with whoever you're across the table from, but a lot of times you're going to get pushback, and it's important to stand your ground. Remember, I get this all the time, and the joke about VC that I make all the time about being in venture is I'm supposed to be determining what I think about the future of a technology I learned about 15 minutes ago, which is basically a fancy way of saying we don't really know what we're talking about. You're an expert on this. Presumably, if you started a company in something, you know a lot about it. So if someone's saying something that doesn't align, don't be argumentative, but make sure to stand your ground. A complaint I get a lot about Canadian founders from US VCs is that they are not assertive enough. Part of that is cultural, and part of that is just, if you haven't done this before, it's hard to know where that line is. The other one is, as you start to do this, you'll hear objections, and fundraising is just a sales process. So just like anything else, how well you handle objections is going to determine how well you succeed. No one has a business that is objection proof. I'll give you a perfect example. Think about some of the most highly valued tech businesses in the world right now. So Tesla or Apple or Microsoft. Many of you use those products. I'm sure you know things about those companies that aren't perfect. Well, if Apple's not perfect at their valuation, how's your company going to be perfect at yours? So how well you handle those objections is actually going to be one of your key determinants for success, along with that big vision and a big market. And the other thing is you need to make it clear if you're trying to raise venture that you're in it to win the market. And win the market means in tech that, there's usually, depending on the size of the market, 1 to 3 players that capture most of the value. And you need to be showing that you've got resolve to win it. Otherwise, you are, by definition, not venture fundable. For angels, they might not care as much. And obviously, debt doesn't care at all. But for venture, this is really important. Any questions on some of these big themes? Okay, so awesome. How do we actually get to success? So the goal of raising an institutional round of capital is to get a lead investor. Once you have a lead investor, everything else is downhill, and downhill in a good way. It becomes very easy to raise the rest of the capital. I've almost never seen someone be able to successfully get a lead term sheet and not be able to raise the best of a round. So let me explain what a lead is. There's kind of 2 ways a lead can take. If you're on safes or convertible notes, the lead is someone who's willing to take at least 25% of the amount out there and go on record as being committed for it. So you can tell people like, yes, Jonah is putting in $300,000 and has agreed to this price, because that means the market is setting the price. Or if it's a price round, like you're raising 2 million on 10 million, it's someone who's putting out a term sheet for you of a minimum of $500,000. This is when I say successfully raising a round, this is the preferred outcome of what we're trying to do. And I'm going to talk about how, but this is what we really want. Everything after a lead becomes very simple because you can tell people, hey, I've got this lead. These are the terms. The market has validated it for them. And one of the paradoxical things about raising venture is the thing that VCs care most about is not what they think about your company. It's actually what other VCs think about your company. I know that's insane, but it's also true, which is why the hardest thing to do is get the first person in. And once the first person's in, everything becomes much easier. Okay, so I've touched on some big themes about like, we're gonna have a big narrative. We're gonna demonstrate a huge market if we're going venture. We're gonna talk about how we're in it to win it. We're gonna be stand our ground, but we're not gonna be argumentative. And we know what our goal is. We are going to get a lead, and whether that lead is someone taking 25% more of the safe round or a convertible debt round, if you're still doing those, or someone who's writing us a term sheet for our actual seed or Series A or pre-seed round. Then let's get into the process. And so I see some great questions popping up. We're going to talk about how we find a lead investor now. And then just to address that there's a large global market question here. So if you're trying to show a global market, how do you do it without being like a crazy person, right? Because you get these slides, $100 billion market, and you feel insane. The easiest way to do it is to say, look, with our current product, the market is X, but our big vision is to do this other big thing that's related, that's going to come out of our core product. So let's say our core product's like a privacy API, but around that API, and we can sell this privacy API, and it's a $500 million market. But as we get these customers on, we're going to add all these other features, and we're going to become like the Gusto for privacy or whatever, or the Shopify for privacy, whatever your thing is, right? And as we do that, the market for that then becomes this other big thing. So you're acknowledging that, yes, that's not available to you right now because you're being realistic, but you're telling a big story and showing a clear path of how your evolution gets to that number without a lot of details, because you aren't going to have a lot of details. And VCs know that, so that's fine. Okay, so how do we find a lead? Which is just the same thing as saying, how do we raise a round? Because those things are basically synonymous. So this is the full process to getting a lead in a priced round. Some funds will add or remove steps, but basically this is how it's done like 10 out of 10 times. So the first thing we need to do is, who are the right funds? We need to identify them. Then we need to connect with them. Then we need to pitch our narrative. We need to get them hooked on, this is what we're doing, and it's really, really big, and it's awesome. Then we need to get into a partner meeting, and we'll talk about partner versus associate meetings. But ultimately, your goal, in most funds, only the partners can write checks. Everyone you're meeting with who's not a partner has massive influence, and you should treat them like they're very important, because they are. But if they aren't a partner, they can't write checks, full stop. And if they don't specifically have the name partner in their title, if it's investor, vice president, or any other title that isn't specifically partner, then they're not a partner. So that's an easy rule of thumb. So then we go on to our partner meeting. From there, they're going to answer a bunch of questions because they'll go back and think about it. Then we have a second partner meeting where they're going to drag in other partners. The other thing is, at most funds, every partner at any fund can kill a deal. So even if one partner loves it, you still have to get the other partners on board, because at every fund, even big funds like Andreessen, which has 19 partners, any one of 19 partners can kill any deal, and they all vote. So they'll drag in other partners to get more people on board. From there on, they do customer calls or other proof points. Other proof points could be a demo. They'll usually do reference checks on you. They'll make sure that your revenue aligns with what you said. From there, you usually go to a full partner or investment committee meeting, which means in a smaller fund, you'll meet with all the partners, or some larger subset for a third meeting. And then from there, you're usually presented with a term sheet. There's a negotiation period, and then they do due diligence, and then there's documents and money. So it's a long process. A lot of founders are like, I had a great first meeting, I think it's going to close, and that's really encouraging. But the first meeting is really just the start. And what you want to do as you prepare for this process and manage this is make sure that we're doing all of these things and that we've got all of these things covered before, so that we're ready. Because lots of times what people do is they have their deck and then they don't know what to do next, and it all becomes really important. So a question I get all the time, how do we know what the right fund is? So funds that will invest in you have the same characteristics. So typically they'll have invested in your vertical before. So they'll have invested not in anything competitive, but like if you're in e-com or a D2C thing and they've never invested or e-com or D2C in their portfolio on their website, they're probably not going to invest in you. If they've never invested in a seed stage before, they're not going to invest in you. So always check that it's vertical and stage appropriate. You'll save yourself a ton of time. And have they been active within the last year? So, just Google or go into Crunchbase and just see, has this fund like written a check this year? If they haven't, they're not active. So there will be some outliers there, but this will cover off like 98% of cases. And right now you're trying to save time because fundraising already takes too long and is super painful. So that's the baseline minimum. I see people all the time reach out to me. They're like, I'm raising $10 million. I'm like, well, that's awesome, but you're way past me. Like, I can't help you. I want to be your first check, not your 10th. So that's the baseline minimum. Even better, they're going to have a partner that knows your space. How do you know if a partner knows your space? Well, they'll probably be an influencer, or they'll have exited from a previous company, or they'll have made adjacent investments, or their medium, or anything else. That would be awesome, because if they know your space, they'll get the problem. And if you don't have to convince them that the problem exists, you're already halfway home. They'll have done deals that have a similar go-to-market motion. So if they don't know your space specifically, maybe they're awesome at product-led growth, or maybe they know a lot about integrations, or maybe they're used to selling MarTech stuff, whatever. They know your region. So it used to be true that US investors would not invest in Canada right now. Now it is much more true that 9 out of the 10, the 10 biggest fundraisers in Canada last year, with the exception of Will Simple, every single one of them was led by a US VC. So the days of like, we don't invest in Canada are gone. So, and then knows your tech. And I don't mean like, if you're Node.js, they know JS. I mean, if you're an AI ML play and they've never invested in AI and ML, it's gonna be really difficult for them to understand why yours is different or better. So those are the things, those are your perfect, that second bucket is your second bucket. And then the things that are disqualifying is they've invested in a competitor. I see this a lot where people like, they invested in a competitor and they don't want to talk. That's phishing, it's bad behavior. Just say kindly, hey, you've invested in X, we feel it's competitive, thank you for your time, everyone will respect that. And the other one is bad reputation, and do look them up on vcguide.co. I'm not going to get into it here, but a bad venture relationship can really sink your company. So to answer some questions, will a video be made available? The deck will be made available for sure. What factors determine a competitive giveaway share? I'm not 100% sure what that's asking, but typically per round, you're giving away about 20% of your equity. There's no hard and fast rule, but 15 to 25% is standard for each round. So seed and series A. Once you start getting into B and whatnot, things like different factors come into play. Is there a source book that defines the various components of a term sheet? Yes. Well, so the National Venture Capital Association, so if you just Google National Venture Capital Association, has what is considered a standard term sheet that most tier 1, tier 2 investors use. There's no such thing as covering off all scenarios, because by definition, a term sheet's literally just a sheet that says these are the terms for financing. Anyone can put anything insane in there, but that covers off all of your major areas, if that's helpful. Okay, so we built our list. Sorry, we've got an idea of like who to stay away from and who we should target. How do we build a list of people to get out? So once we know our list, we need to build a list. So you can go on Crunchbase, you can use PitchBook. Communitech is like a world-class resource and a giant in Canada. So, I mean, the fact that you got to this call means you're pretty good at getting resources already. So ask your advisors. And then, you know, you want to ask for introductions when you're ready to do this. When you think you've got all your pieces ready, you know, you want to build your list, right? And then more so than just a fund, and this is one of the things that people do all the time, like, I want to talk to round 13. And like, you know, I love round 13, like round 13 invested in my last company. Great guys. I like Bruce. Bruce is on my board. But like, perfect example, if you've got an e-com company, Bruce isn't the guy at round 13 that does that. That's Bram. So ideally you want to find the right partner, the partner who gets it. And you're going to have to do some research here, but you will be far more successful if you target a specific partner at a fund rather than just a fund, if you can do it. Because that partner is going to get your problem, and then you won't have to sell them on the problem. You'll just have to sell them on your solution, which is like half the battle gone. As to how I track, I get this all the time. I really would not invest in software. Trello, Airtable, hell, sticky notes on the opposite wall. Like, you just need to track what happened and who did it. It's just another pipeline. If you've got HubSpot or Salesforce because you're paying for it for something else or you get it for free, awesome. But I really wouldn't spend money on doing this. To answer some questions. Is it better to do a convertible or safe in terms of getting investors on board? The answer right now in the US is safe. Look, if you did a convert, you're not dead in the water by any stretch of the imagination, but us, Techstars, YC, AngelPad all only write safes. And so if you do that as a percentage of pre-seed coming out, like between the three of us or four of us are writing like 700, 800 deals a year, all on safes. So safes is kind of the way to go at this point. Is it better to do an equity round? Well, safes convert into equity. So, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. A typical rule of thumb is if you're raising much more than $1 million, you probably want your VCs, if any one VC is putting in more than like 500,000 or something, they probably will want a price round so that you actually have a shareholder agreement, because a safe is an agreement that you're going to convert into something later. But there's no hard and fast rules there. How is this process different for angel and pre-seed rounds? Pre-seed rounds, it's the exact same. Angel rounds is the exact same, except you're building your list is building it for angels. Angels also care about different things. Angels aren't typically as worried about, you 100 or 1,000 Xing their money. So angels are usually more interested in like how you're actually going to run it as a business. They're a little more grounded, typically in Canada. Increasingly in the US, angels are, a lot of the people investing in angel are looking for the same things VCs are looking. So you're just building a different list. The difference with angels is they're much harder to find. Although AngelList and Alex Norman, who I sure comes through here, is a really good place to start. If a VC exists, so this is actually a great question. Yeah, just using Excel to build a list is fine. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. Like I built mine in Excel. We still use Excel for that stuff. If a VC, Y Combinator is great info on safe. They invented the safe. We use the safe off the YC website, even though YC is a competitor. YC is great at what they do, so that's fine. If a VC invests $500,000 a seed, what would they expect in a return for the fund? At what stage would they sell out? Okay, so here's the deal. And here's what you got to remember when you're talking to a VC. If you can't reasonably tell a story about how you're going to 100x their money, they don't care. I know that sounds insane, but venture math is insane. They're looking for Stripe or DoorDash. So it doesn't mean you're going to. My last company is certainly not going to 100x anyone's money, and it will still be successful. But when we're venture investing, we want to hear a story about how you're going to be $1 billion company at the pre-seed and seed stage. And then as to when VCs sell out, different VCs sell out at different points. Your pre-seed investors will usually be gone by your Series C and D, but it depends on a million things, and there is no one way to answer that question. Okay, so getting meetings. So this is the exact same as every other sales process you've ever run in your life, basically. You've got a list of targets, which happen to be VCs in your Excel sheet or whatever. And now we need to get in front of them. So how do we do that? So one thing I highly recommend against doing is I wouldn't do like one of these a week. You want to just set aside like a month where you're just fundraising so you get into the groove and so that your teams know you're not doing anything else for a bit. So we're going to target the partners that are funds. Partners are far more likely to take meetings if they get introed versus blind emails. I've had multiple partners tell me when I'm raising, if you're good enough to get my money, you're good enough to get an introduction. Your job is to find that intro path. LinkedIn is your friend. Ask those connections for introductions. If they believe in you, they should do it. I'm always happy to make introductions as an example. If you don't have a path to partner, target the associates. The associate's job is to take your meeting. So we'll talk about how to get them to do that. So that's with common connections. So you go on LinkedIn, see if you got common connections with the partners, the associates, and you get meetings that way. The other way is laddering in. So it's like going through Communitech or advisors, like someone who knows someone. And you really want to book 35 of your own meetings via your network and grinding. So when you're ready and you found the person to make the intro, you want to have two things for them. A send deck. A send deck is like 5-6 pages. That's just your narrative. And your narrative is like why you're going to be awesome. So it's here's our awesome team. Here's our awesome market. Here's our awesome vision. And here's our awesome proof points. I see a lot of people sending 20-page send decks. No one cares yet. I just want to know it's a good team and a good market, and I'm willing to take a phone call. So just make sure that your narrative is really clear. 10 pages max. Don't focus on your product. No one really cares about your product at this point. They just want to know that there's a big enough market and that you're awesome enough to take a phone call with. And then you need an intro email for intro. Short is key here. VCs actually don't read stuff, which you'll learn. They skim stuff because they just get so much of it. So 2 sentences about what you're building, the problem you solve, the value you provide. From there, bullet points are a few sentences on the most important numbers or facts. And that could be like, in just 6 months, we've gotten 8 clients and we're growing at 11% month over month. Or it could be, we've solved this really hard AI problem that no one else can solve. Or we've got this great, whatever the 3 to 4 most impressive things about your company are in bullet point form, put them in. And it doesn't matter what they are, is just that they're something. And again, short. So like 2 sentences about the problem you solve, value you provide, your bullets, and then a strong call to action. Do you have 30 minutes to take a call? We're interested in your fund. A note on associate meetings. So obviously the goal is partner meetings. With that said, associate meetings are not a waste of time. Associate meetings will turn into partner meetings 30% of the time if you're targeting right. So yes, it's more work, but a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk to associates. Yeah, you want to talk to a partner, but if you can't talk to a partner, then you definitely want to talk to associates. I've seen multiple people raise monster rounds through associates. If associates didn't have a function, they wouldn't have a job. So a couple notes here, always be nice, research the associate. These associates are used to arrogant founders like just not being awesome. If you're awesome and you go out of your way to research them, just like you'd research a partner and talk to them like they're a partner, they will push extra hard for you. The other thing is all associates have networks of friends who are also associates. It's part of how they like have a job. So if you can get them to like you, even if you're not a fit, and I do this too, if like someone calls me and they're like, hey, I have this awesome thing and they're great, even if it's something we can invest in for whatever reason, I'm more than happy to pass them on. Associates even more so because trading companies is a currency that they have. Any questions on just getting meetings? Okay, so you've got the meeting and you're presenting the deck. You're presenting your deck, you're telling them we're this awesome team in this big market. We're solving this huge problem. We're gonna win the market with the right help from awesome funds like you. And here's the value we provide. And here's the proof points we're gonna do that. Awesome. Then VCs give you feedback. It's really difficult to understand VC feedback. And the reason for that is pretty simple. VCs never want to tell a founder it's a bad idea because we're wrong a lot. And if it's a bad idea and then you founded Uber, we look like idiots. And we never want to be rude to a founder because we know we're wrong a lot. So it's just our opinion. So because of that, all this feedback is couched in this like really soft language that makes it almost impossible to know what the hell a VC is thinking most of the time. So to really get information, we have to go beyond the answers. So you'll hear this a lot. Let us know when you have a lead. You need more traction. I'll take it to my partners. All of that is useless feedback. Your job here is to get actionable feedback and concrete next steps from each and every meeting and then to track it in your Excel. This is true for both positive feedback because you need information on how to actually turn this positive feedback into a close, and negative so that you can improve your pitch. So if, for example, you get, and I'll just take a question here, when you hear this is too early for us, so the question is, how true is that? This is too early of us is frankly the most frustrating feedback on the planet because it could mean that we hate your startup a lot and we never want to hear about this again. And it could literally mean we want you to have $20,000 more a month in revenue. So what you want to do in that situation, if someone says, this is too early for us, say, what revenue level, if I came back, would move this to a next step? And if they don't have a good answer, then they're just being nice. Because if it's too early, by definition, at some later stage, this will be interesting. Get them to define that later stage, because then you can come back to them and be like, hey, remember when you said if I come back with $25,000 a month in revenue, you'd take it to a partner meeting? I meant $25,000 a month in revenue. I did what I said. Now you do what you said. So for positive feedback, you need to get information. So if they're like, let us know when you have a lead, just be like, awesome. What type of lead would you be looking for? What valuation range would you be interested at? Would you be interested in participating in a round of safes? At what point would that happen? Just hammer them with questions. There's no cost. And of course, be polite, be kind, be empathetic. Don't be a jackhammer. But you got to answer those. If it's negative, if they're like, we don't believe, be like, what makes you, we think the go-to-market motion's too hard. Well, what makes you think that? What's your rationale there? And then push back if pushback is appropriate. And then keep a list of all your objections, every objection you've ever gotten, and start weaving that into your deck. Because if you get the same objection twice, it means you're going to get it 20 more times. Question, what if it's a pre-seed round with no team in place so far, a non-tech founder building on a no-code platform, any chance to succeed? Well, sure, you always have a chance to succeed. The question is going to be, how are you going to evolve from this? If you don't have a team and you don't have a platform, then you don't have a company yet. But if you yourself as a non-tech founder are going to build something in no code and then use it to get market validation and recruit a team, then sure. I mean, I just spoke to the founder of Rapini who built $1 billion no-code company before. What usually happens in the first meeting with the VC? This is really just you pitching your deck for 20 minutes and then 10 minutes of questions. Almost always. During that first meeting, Canadian founders make this mistake almost constantly because we like being polite and we like being helpful. We aren't just happy to be here. Your time is valuable as well. We want partners that are, this is what you guys need to be saying. We want partners that are really going to be moving our business. Remember, this is a marriage, and just like a marriage, you wouldn't get married to the first person that showed any interest in you. And if you did, that would probably come off a certain way. The same is true in venture. So this is a trick that works in getting them more interested because it shows you're a better founder. So you need to interview the VCs. It shows you can advocate for yourself. It shows you're thinking about it the right way. It shows you've been coached, which means you know how to get resources around you. This is something that's good 100% of the time. So you really want to know, how are they going to help you? You're giving them 5 to 9 years of your life. Beyond money, what are they going to give you? Money is a commodity. Can they make introductions to customers, other funds? And when a VC says, how can I be helpful? Say, you can introduce me to one other fund that might be interested in this. Put them on the spot. Know who your partners are. See if they're full of it or not. And then just be straight up, like, why should I go with you guys? And again, be polite. Don't be arrogant. But you need to ask these questions because you need to know these answers the same as they do. Is it better to take a couple years to prove technology or market traction, or better to focus on big picture? It really depends on what outcome you want. With the way markets are going right now, if you can raise with no revenue and a great picture and you think you can build a very large company, then capital to growth is better. But if you are, like, the honest truth is I made just as much money bootstrapping to 5 million with no investors than I did raising 15 million and building a much bigger company. Because at 5 million, like, you make a lot of money. Most of the rich people I know didn't run venture-backed companies. So I'll park that question, but if you're looking venture, then faster is better. If you're not looking venture, then it's a whole separate question about how you should run a business. And a lot of that just aligns with, like, how do you want to live? Like, running a VC company is, like, really stressful and fast-paced. Running any company is stressful and fast-paced. Sorry, just so we're clear, your founder job is like 10 times harder than the VC job. But big question there. Is it true that if a VC likes your pitch in the first meeting, they will quickly invite you over for a second meeting with them? That's a great question, which I totally didn't plant and ladders into my next set of slides. So if you've done this right, you will have very actionable next steps after that first meeting. Make sure you complete whatever you've promised them within 24 hours. Some VCs have this thing that I frankly think is stupid, that founder to response time is a good indicator of future performance. I don't think that's true, but some people think it's true, so just do it. If they say they're in and it's on safe, send them documents immediately. Don't give them a chance to move. Send them whatever they ask for, like, that night. Be clear and forward so so that I don't finish this, so that they know what is coming next. You'll have really actionable next steps. So this is the quick overview of what happens next. So if it's an associate, they'll say, I'll take this to my partners and get back to you. At which point you need to ask, when will you take it to your partners? When can I expect a response? Just ask them. Because if like we're taking your partners on Monday and you don't hear from them by Wednesday, it means they're not interested. And you can just cross them off and that's fine. If it's a partner, they will, if they're very interested. Some funds move like super quick. Like the big funds, if they're tier 1, if they're interested, usually in the room, they'll ask you. Or sometimes they'll be like, I just need to run this by a few other partners, see what they say. And they'll get back to you within like 3 to 4 days. But from there, it's usually, if it's an associate, bring you into a partner meeting where you basically do the same thing, except now with a partner. Or if it's a partner meeting, they usually fire back with some questions or like, hey, how are you thinking about X, Y, Z? And then, like I said, you know, I ran through this before, but this is usually the way this all works. Oh, sorry. So, you know, I ran through this, but this is everything that needs to happen for you to get money. So that's why it's such a grind, because at any one of these points, it could fall away until there's money in the bank. Do all co-founders need to be in all fundraising meetings? No. In your associate meetings, definitely not. And in your first partner meeting, it should probably be either your CEO, or if you're running like a bottoms-up dev platform, your head of revenue, if that's the other co-founder. Only at partner meetings should you ever have both co-founders in there. It doesn't look great for associate meetings and even a first partner meeting sometimes. You guys should be too busy to waste your time on a first meeting. There is a lot of posturing here, and I know that that sounds stupid, and it only sounds stupid because it is, but it's also kind of how the game's played. Getting to yes, if we're lucky, we've got a lead early on, but if we don't, we've got a chicken and egg problem, which happens a lot, where it's hard to get VCs to move without having other VCs interested. To solve this problem, there's a couple ways you can do it. This is what happens a lot. People like, who's in, right? The big challenge you want to solve for here is you can price people in with safes at a discount. Just be like, yeah, I'm just throwing together, you know, $500,000 on a low valuation. Let me know if you're in, and then I'll send you all the documents on Monday with who else is in. And then it solves the chicken and egg problem. There's a lot of reading on this, but this is actually one of the biggest ways you stall out. And you definitely want an advisor walking you through some of this, whether it's Communitech or Communitech and someone else. To answer your question, pursue, I know, sorry, I already answered that. Okay. Sometimes you'll get inbound later stage funds who are just searching, and people like, this is a waste of time. So just, yes, they can't help you right now, but if they're interested in the space, still get on the phone with them, ask for feedback, and then ask for introductions. So in summary, this is really, really, really hard, but you can do it. You need to get as many of the right meetings as possible based on the criteria that I gave you. You need to run the process. And in each and every meeting, you need to get to actionable feedback, use that actionable feedback to improve, and get concrete next steps. Otherwise, you're unlikely to know where you stand. And without that information to iterate, your 30th meeting will be just as good as your first. And you need your 30th meeting to be 10 times better than your first. Because if you've never done this before, it's really hard to know how to do it until you're in the room. Yeah, hope that's helpful.
Jonah, I think that was super helpful and very informative. And thank you for, you know, all of that honest behind the scenes kind of look and perspective. I think it's really appreciated by the audience. So we're, you know, we have a couple of minutes before we wrap up. If there's any last questions that are, you know, are still on your mind that we didn't get to. Looks like there's a couple coming in here. Jonah, do you want me to read them to you, or do you want to?
Sure, I can just, can you walk through the mechanics of a safe at a high level? So when the mechanics of a safe are basically, there's two kinds of pre-money or post-money. You basically send them like a 2-page document, and it's all it means is that you are agreeing to sell a specified percentage of your company at a specified value that converts when you next have a priced round. So if it's like, I'm doing a 5% safe at for $500,000, then like you're agreeing you're selling 5% of your company for 500 grand, and it converts when you next do a round. They have no legal rights beyond that. It doesn't convert into actual shares until you do something else. The safe is the simplest thing on the planet. It's like a 2-page document. If it's off the YC website, you literally don't need a lawyer. That's why everyone does safes, because there's nothing to it. Like, we sign safes all the time. We don't, our founders don't even look at them. How can I help? Well, that's a pretty broad question. Everyone will have my contact information. If you're a B2B SaaS company and you're building something exciting, I can probably give you help like this, most importantly, and money secondly. Beyond that, it really depends. I might not be able to at all, but I'm always happy to help Canadian founders, because founding companies is the hardest thing I've ever done. If you're Canadians looking at Series A, is there a location that you would recommend focusing on? No, North America is one big happy thing right now. We've got offices in New York, Toronto, and San Francisco. My Toronto cohort this time I've got like half the companies are from the US, half are from Canada. Some funds still care, but most of them don't. And they used to have to make you be a Delaware company. They don't even care anymore. Is it true that founders are better off to find the VCs that are okay to them and then slowly moving on to great ones that you really want? Your best bet is actually to try and find people who can't invest in you at all to give you honest feedback, because they have no problem being super honest. So if you can find, like, if you're a pre-seed and you can find a Series A VC to actually give you feedback, they'll have no problem ripping into you, because it only makes you better and it's not a no. You'll get past that like wall of fake VC feedback. The second best thing to do is, yes, find a bunch of funds that you don't really want their money to practice on, because like, you wouldn't, if you were, I don't know, what's a bad analogy? You wouldn't, if it was your first time playing basketball, you wouldn't want to play in the NBA finals. Your first venture meeting probably shouldn't be Andreessen. Raising or not raising, that is its own hour or lifetime course. So I wish I could, but that is, Christina's smiling because she knows there are no simple answers. And guys, here's the biggest one. This is like, everyone's journey is different. It's going to be really different based on like who you are as a human, what you want, your market, and everything else. And the only person who's really going to know is you. You need an advisor and someone who like actually knows you and your business, or is willing to spend an hour to learn to truly answer that for you. And I always say the only people you should be really afraid of on this journey are the people who are really sure. I'm not really sure about much, because I learn from founders every day. So there is no one answer. There's just an answer for you right now. If the process is so hard, wouldn't it be better? I mean, you guys are really lucky to be with Communitech. I think everyone needs a bunch of different advisors doing a bunch of different things. No one, like, I'm an advisor. There's tons of stuff I'm totally useless at, and it would be awesome if I was, but like, I'm just one person. Our organization's got people all over. There's some stuff we're just not good at. Communitech has a leading reputation for a reason. You need a bunch of different advisors doing a bunch of different things, and founders, that's your job, is to make sure you have the resources around you to solve all of it. And like, some of that's even like healthy eating, like exercise, like all of it matters. And your job is to surround yourself with everything. And if you see a hole, there's no one organization on planet Earth that is going to be able to do that for you. Any suggestions for an angel when they want some fiduciary and governance control? Angels should have no fiduciary or governance control ever for any reason. Run a safe. Why do they want control? They're putting in a tiny amount of money. They're backing they're backing the jockey. Like, they need to believe in you. And if they don't, if it's between that money and not existing, then I guess you take it. But to do the whole like preferred shares and everything else for a small angel round is really, really, really not a standard practice. And the best way to deal with that is, the angel probably has really good intentions. Most angels I know they're literally called angels. This is not a malicious group. They just don't know. So what you want to do is put them in front of someone who does know, to explain to them why that's a terrible idea, not just for you, because it's terrible for you as a founder. It's bad for their investment. Is it true you get down more if you're a husband and wife team? I've invested in a bunch of husband and wives. Look, you've just doubled down on your marriage. Congratulations. I'm a married guy. I've got 2 kids. So now you're married twice. So like, but the other person is married their co-founder. I'm always betting on a marriage. You guys just happen to share the same bed and an office. Some VCs will care, most won't. It's really good for some reasons because I basically treat your equity as solo founder equity. We care about dilution less, which means you can have a really good outcome for your family. Even with selling more, it gives you a lot more options for financing. You have to care about dilution less. You can bring on more advisors. But like, yeah, divorce would really suck ×2. So I guess my advice is don't get divorced. I don't know. It's fine. Sorry, I'm married. I get it. Like it shouldn't stop you from building something amazing. I have invested in a Communitech member who's a husband and wife team, Rebecca and the Equator team, and they're awesome. What's a typical first raise amount? When do you start showing the waters for some subsequent rounds? So I'll speak to B2B SaaS, which is to the extent that I have expertise, which is some stuff I know a little bit about, I guess, is a better way of putting it. How much money do you need? Look, when I needed money at the beginning for my first company, like a raise was 50 grand because I had no money. When I started my second company, I had a little bit of money and I was able to get to some traction. My first raise amount was 500 grand. So, you're going to need to raise what you need to raise, but typically pre-seed is like friends and family, and angel rounds are like under 500 grand. Pre-seed is like 250 to $1 million, and seed is like 1 to 4 million. I'm doing this using US scale. I know it's less in Canada, but Canada is very tied to the US, and ultimately you're later. And then subsequent rounds will be based on milestones. So again, B2B software, like $5,000 to $25,000 a month in revenue is usually a seed round, and your A is usually at $1 million in annual revenue. These are approximate, and if you're deep tech, it varies, but decent rules of thumb.
Awesome. Well, once again, Jonah, thank you so much. Thank you for even going over a few minutes to get all those questions answered. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Again, Jonah will be doing some office hours with Communitech, so reach out to investor@communitech.ca to get connected, or always your CSM and advisor, and we will do our best to get you connected with the right resources. Thanks again for joining, everybody, and for staying on a little bit past 3. Take care and have a great week. Thanks again.
Good luck, everyone. Reach out if you need something.